We're just listening to George Strait. Check yes or no.
Well, I think we're calling this. What are we calling this? Conversations.
Our community conversation, or community.
All right, that sounds good.
I've still got to put a contest out, or we got to settle on one.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
And because special day for me, my name is Valentin. Today is Valentine's Day, and I guess it's appropriate that we had George Strait playing "Check Yes or No." I think that's one of the ultimate Valentine's Day song. Do you want to be my friend? Check yes or no.
You want to be my boyfriend,
Yeah,
girlfriend?
back in the day, that's how it used to work.
It keeps it pretty simple, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It keeps it down to a checkbox. But
Now the history of Valentine's Day, there's a number of different stories. It seems that the ones that I've heard about aren't really good endings as far as Valentine goes. In a couple of cases, and both of them are about the same time in the third century, Emperor Claudius II, and this is the one I think applies the most. He put out a decree because single men made better soldiers than married men because they had more to lose back at home, the wife and kids and stuff. That none of the young men are to be married until he recruits his armies. And there was a priest, Valentinus,
yeah,
and he was marrying couples anyways. Now it's either the priest Valentinus or Saint Valentine of Terni, who was a bishop, and they were both about the same time. Maybe they were both marrying couples kind of behind the scenes there, and both of them were beheaded.
Oh my!
So I think that's one of the stories. The other one is Valentine was a prisoner who was also aiding Christians in escaping from the Roman Empire, and he was sentenced to death. And the story goes that he fell in love with a jailer's daughter.
Ah,
Okay, so that's probably not a good thing to do back then. And when he was put to death, he wrote a letter to his love, and he ended it from your Valentine. So that's another good story as far as how the Valentine started. So there's my 2 cents on how Valentine's Day originated. I want to wish my wife a happy Valentine. Her birthday was yesterday, so I got to kill two birds with one stone. Took her to eat and got her a cake and stuff. So I think my obligation has ended there. But interesting. I was in line at Walmart in Los Lunas a little bit earlier. I went and got my mom a book and my daughter a stuffed animal, and I was getting ready to check out, and all the lights went out.
Yes.
In Walmart.
Yes.
And they said, sorry, folks, we can't check you out. You got to leave. So then it took about 45 minutes to an hour just to get out of the parking lot with all the cars. And I think all the businesses were shut down in that area. So maybe that's a sign that I don't have to give out any more Valentine's Day gifts today. So do you have anybody special you want to wish?
I do. I have Karen, and she's real special. She's my Valentine, and I just got through taking her mom up to Albuquerque also, and passed there and talked to Kathy, and she got stuck at a tire shop there when the power went out, and had a really good Saturday with Andrew Ferris of InXS, songwriter with InXS, and his wife Marlena. They were visiting Kathy and Doug, two couples that I really really am impressed by and remember, and happy Valentine's to you and Gloria as well. The thing with Valentine's Day for me is interesting is we look at some of the romances. You talked about 300 and the Romans, but some of the ideas of individual choice, what we take in Western culture to be the norm, where we get to pick our romantic partner, our marriage partner, our boyfriend, or girlfriend, check yes or no. I mean, that thought and that ability actually emerged in the 1300s with the troubadours, and it's a very unique thought. And it emerged, but it was also a conflict. So when we look at the stories of Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare, that is a relationship of individual choice. The family had a different choice for them. They were supposed to abide by the family's dictate. They were supposed to be part of the family. But in this story, we have the emergence of the individual in Romeo and Juliet who choose their own relationship. we also have other tragedies like that emerging at the same time between the great love of Tristan and Isolde, when Tristan was supposed to go get Isolde and bring her back to King Mark, but they fell in love and they drank the love potion on the way over, and then he would suffer anything to be with her. And again, that was a romance of individual choice, as well as Guinevere, who was promised to Arthur.
Oop.
What did we? We're looking.
A camera went up.
Oh, the camera got tired of it. All right, let's see if we could get this straightened out here again. All right, that was funny, but yeah. All right, there it is. All right, yeah. Move the camera around. Now it's gonna play with me just a little bit. All right. So again, there's Guinevere and Lancelot, and Guinevere was promised to Arthur, and that was another tragedy of individual choice. So the Western idea of choice, it's still very new. So that's 700 years old.
Yep. It's either the boy or the girl that caused trouble, or both of them together are causing trouble with the families. And I think that's going to happen through the end of time. That's just the way love goes.
I think so. And I think your story was really neat too, because again, trying to recruit soldiers for war and how love and war, we always hear that nothing's fair in love and war, but that whole thing of trying to make sure that they're not committed yet until I've got my soldiers.
Yep.
Give them something to fight for.
It all goes back to the battles.
The battles, the war, and the history. That's pretty good, Val. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's Valentine's Day is it's a good day, and we played some music earlier, and I just posted a good song by my friend Doug, Tularosa Rose, another love song, but lots of love songs out there, and I hope whether you buy gifts or not, I hope that you spend a quiet, special moment with the one that you love, and let them know how special they are.
And there's nothing like a song and a dance for a special day like this. Even if you're on the kitchen floor, put the little boombox going or the earplugs, one in her ear, one in your ear, and dance around and freak the kids out. I mean, that would be wonderful.
You're such a romantic. That's beautiful. All right. Well, what else you got for us today?
Well, Wednesday, we're going to have Vocal with Val Wednesday, because I know you're leaving on Thursday to Texas to a roundup or something. What's happening in Texas?
Well, in Texas, we got the Alpine Poetry Cowboy Gathering that's taking place down in Texas, and I've been holding back for a long time to go one of these events, and I'm going to go this coming Thursday and Friday. Got some great Western country artists that are going to be there, including our own Doug Figgs of Lemitar, New Mexico is going to be there. Jim Jones of Albuquerque is going to be there. But also going to get to meet Brent Hill of Utah. Brent Hill is another great Western country artist that's out there. Darren Little from Wyoming is going to be there. We understand Dave Stamey is going to be there. So some of the leading artists in Western country music are going to be out there. It's only 6 hours away, so this is my time to go down, and I'm going to bring back some live interviews with some of these artists and get a chance for some of our listeners. We've got a really strong fellowship on our Western country Saturdays and Wednesdays that we do. So Wednesdays is a great day, and really just looking forward to getting down there and meeting them. We've got another special event happening March 5th right here in Socorro. We've got the Socorro Stagecoach Sessions, and we're going to have Almeda Bradshaw. She's a female Western country artist that's coming through town, and we're going to do a concert with her and Doug Figgs. You can find that out on our Rio Grande Facebook page under live events. And we're going to have dinner and a concert with Doug and Almeda over at Jackson Ranch Steakhouse. And that's going to include a meal and everything. So, yeah, going to Alpine, Texas, it's real important to get down there and kind of connect with some of the artists. I got a lot of talent moving through Socorro. We just had Andrew Ferris and his wife Melanie of Australia come through and visit. And it was really a pleasure to meet them as well. So just, continuing to do the music thing, because like it says, maybe next year instead of dancing in the kitchen, we can actually have a Valentine's Day dance.
Oh, absolutely. I hope so.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're going to learn more and bring more awareness to the old country Western tradition. One of the traditions of the country and Western folklore is raising cattle, farming, and ranching. And on my way up to therapy this morning on one of the radio stations, they talked about how the ranch life is disintegrating in the United States because of the big companies coming in and taking over the cattle industry. And I think that's a shame, because so much of those traditions have to do with that country life of having a piece of land on your own, raising some animals, and trading either for money or goods and supplies.
Bartering.
To sustain your family. And more that whole way of life is going away. So I think maybe through the music, through the poetry, through some of the other stuff, we can bring awareness of what life was really like on the out on the frontier.
Well, it's fascinating you say that, and it's a good discussion to have because we just had COVID-19 come through, as we all know, and we had the fire in the one meat packing plant. We realized we had 4 national meat packing plants in the U.S., and with COVID and a fire at one, we had a meat shortage. We had an actual meat shortage, and that was really, really powerful because here in New Mexico really took a leading step in saying, hey, let's bring back local beef inspection. Let's try to get more butcher shops, more processing. Let's try to bring that back to the state level. So New Mexico is working on a whole to do that. So it's really good. And the music is really important because it highlights the ranching life. It highlights not so much the rugged individual, but the interdependence. A lot of times we hear the gunfighter and we think of the gunfighter when we think Western, but we don't think, like you said, the pioneer, the family, the husband and wife raising their kids, and that real American thing of self-reliance. We're seeing where this global corporation kind of erodes the self-reliance and the individual. Like it says, the individual only emerged in 1215 with the Magna Carta, and I've said this before, but it's a fairly new concept when you look at China and when you look at India and you look at other cultures around the globe. The emergence of the individual with rights against the crown, and that's a new one in our country. And the West was really a place where this individual could come out, like you said, and be self-reliant and make his own way. It was hard, but it was his or her life. And many of the songs in the Western are about that. They're about the individual, his wife, and the couples, the families are so important in this music, and handing down the tradition is so important. So we see, you might say that, it's been a joke, oh, this is the last cowboy song, but what we're really seeing is we're seeing some of the people really, Canada's just made a big step to keep a horse ranch there and keep it in family hands. There's some big things going on. Even that feral cow issue that just took place in Catron County, the New Mexico Cattle Association was kind of opposed to it. They've said they're going to go ahead and call the herds out there from helicopters and federal helicopters and things like that. So yeah, it's you can think that it's going away, but some of it's actually coming back. And as we hear more about it and we learn about what that really is, I think we've seen a lot of people even move out to rural areas here. I mean, Tumbleweed Diner in Magdalena, they came down from Seattle. We're seeing a lot of growth, maybe not in ranching. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes on in the general store, the supplies. There's a lot of things that go on to support those rural communities. So yeah, I'm excited to go because there's some really good current, what we call roots Western music, and roots mean it's new, it's original. We just got through inducing into the Hall of Fame here with the International Western Music Association, Jack Thorpe, one of the early cowboy poets and song gatherers from the 1800s, excuse me. And of course, our own Earl Gleason, his father came out here with the Tome Land Grant back then, and we got our own Doug Figgs, like we said, mentioned out there, ranching away as well as many others. And if we embrace the agriculture, it'll be easier because the Chile workers, the Glenn Duggans, they have a hard time finding workers because that work isn't very elevated. And if we can elevate it and elevate that kind of life through music and song and celebrating it and honoring it, we might do a better job of encouraging more people to work in the agricultural industry.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations about this, but the one thing that I just felt a need to speak on was here we had generations of family, all the way back to the Oklahoma Sooners time.
Yes.
When go out there, get your 4 corners of your land and do with it what you want. Most of them said we're gonna farm, or we're gonna grow wheat or animals, and that kind of life has been going on for on 2 centuries now, and all of a sudden that kind of sustainability is being overrun, I think, by people that may have not ever seen a cow on 4 legs walking around in the prairies, and that's, we laugh at it, but it's also a sad thing that so much of the profit that should be going to sustain those little communities goes into the pocket of some billionaire that had a business plan instead of a plan on how to keep my 300 head of cattle going again this year. So
yeah, we have seen the sell-off of a lot of big ranches. In fact, the movie Yellowstone just bought a big ranch in Texas. Those things are happening. But like I said, we've seen also with COVID that this nationalization, this centralizing of resources like that through those global is not a good thing. It's not a good thing for the employee. It's not a good thing for the family. And as we just found with the big freedom convoy and some of the things that went on, they're stopping the flow of goods and supplies. It's not a good thing. And we need to figure out how to get back. And I'm just a big proponent of doing things local production, local consumption. You know, New Mexico is putting out things. They just added some laws this last year to try to generate more locally produced New Mexico food, put more New Mexico food in our K through 12 schools, in our cafeterias.
Absolutely.
So New Mexico's doing a good thing of saying, hey, let's bring back our state beef inspectors. Let's put New Mexico food in our plates. Let's quit exporting so much of it. Let's make it local, because like you said with Walmart, all of a sudden the lights go out. You know, we get in some of these situations, and if your stuff is coming from Missouri or Oklahoma, it may not get to your dinner table. So the more things we can do local, the better self-reliance we have. And as Aristotle teaches us back in Aristotelian ethics, you know, the pursuit of happiness is self-reliance. That is it. If you're self-reliant, you can overcome the hard times, you can enjoy the good times, and at the end of your life, you can feel happy because you were able to overcome the challenges and celebrate the triumphs, and it was your life. So when we look at the pursuit of happiness, in Aristotelian thinking, that is the path of self-reliance. So as we learn to be more self-reliant as individuals, we actually find the ability and the means to overcome life's tragedies and challenges and be happy at the end of our life.
And we're talking about it like it's an ancient philosophy,
Yeah.
but you know, I think back just to the 70s when I was a kid running around this area here before this was even here.
Right.
It was nothing but desert. Right down the street on the corner was Uncle Ernie's a grocery store. And before it was Uncle Ernie's, it was Hillcrest Market, ran by Ruby Hubner.
Yeah.
And inside that little market was a little meat market, a little couple of fridges. She'd display the meat. There was a bandsaw on the back. She cut up pork chops and round steak. And I remember my mom sending me to go get a piece of meat so she could make papa caldo or something. And then just down on Spring Street was another small market, you know. So there used to be that kind of living where we didn't have to all go to Walmart to meet. You know, the neighborhoods had their little markets.
Right.
You know,
on the corner.
Candy Torres had his little market there.
Yeah.
And they sold a little bit of canned goods and some fresh fruits and vegetables and milk. You know, it was enough for us. We didn't have to go nowhere. So that kind of living, I think, is where this newer generations don't remember and don't, I guess, appreciate and see the necessity of having that kind of living again.
They never experienced it.
Exactly.
And that's what's good about these conversations, and that's what's good about the Western country music is the Western country music celebrates our ancestors, celebrates the hardships that they went through, that they chose to go through, and why that was important and gave vitality to life. Stories like yours about what it used to be. My grandma's was the same place. We'd go hiking, and you know, she'd give us a quarter. We'd go down and buy gum and things like that, and all the adventures we could have, you know, right in our own little neighborhood. You know, but we're seeing this thing. But again, we have to really, in my opinion, you know, we're losing a lot of American to that because again, corporations came out of maritime law. I could go into history. Let me not go that far. But we really have to look at what an individual is. We have to teach our kids what an individual is and the individuals that made up America. Because when we look at 1800 to 1900, it was individuals that made a lot of significant developments and advancements. And that freedom to be creative and to be an individual, you know, is really important to the fabric of what America is. But if we don't really appreciate the individual, the interdependent family, you know, the ranchers and some of the key characters of who we are, like you said, if our children don't know it, if we're not carrying that legacy forward and we're not telling the stories and we're not sharing the song, how do they know what it was? How do they know what they're losing? And that's where this music is really important because a lot of it really honors our ancestors and honors our pioneers who came out and honors where we are today and the struggles that we have. And it's good. It's good.
I agree. And, you know, you talked a little bit about the decision from the state Supreme Court, I believe, about the feral cows. And what agency is now able to go and call them in by helicopter, and are they going to be destroying them from the helicopter? I don't understand the whole. I mean,
Yeah,
I've heard the stories.
I have to read. I have to research the agency, the exact agency that's going to do it. But again, there was a pushback because the federal government wanted to call unbranded cattle from wilderness areas over in the Gila and the blue eastern Arizona, western New Mexico. And the New Mexico Cattle Workers Association was against it. The ranchers were against it because of the fact that how do you identify a branded cow from an unbranded cow from the air? And the environmentalists were against it because leaving a dead carcass on the ground encourages wolves to learn to eat on cows. And so those were the two primary arguments in that argument. But it has been ruled that the federal government is allowed to go ahead and start calling those herd, and it kind of has to be federal in some regards because of the fact, like it says, it is that border of western New Mexico and Arizona over in the blue where some of those cattle are. So yeah, we'll have to I'll have to do some research on that and find the exact organization, but it was approved that they could call the herd from helicopters, and that means some, like you said, dangerous precedents when you're in a helicopter and you think, wow, how do you get a kill shot that drops a cow?
Exactly. Exactly. And to me, that was. There's not, well, maybe there are a few snipers available that are that good, but they're not going to be called upon to do that kind of work, and in which case, I don't see 100% of humane destruction of those animals, so.
Well, and it's interesting because they actually had a rancher, they actually did hire a rancher, a cowboy, to go out there and bring some of those in, and he was able to bring in 20 of these wild cattle in but it takes work, and it takes, like we talked about, a breed of man and woman that's not very common. Somebody that's familiar with horseback, can operate the horse in a wilderness area and do cowboying. And so that's as a rare skill these days in a lot of people. That's why they resort to the helicopter. But they did have a cowboy out there that did bring 20 wild cows in. Was able to round them up and bring them in. But like I says, it's one of those skill sets that they're not comfortable with. They don't know how to work it.
And I could imagine back in the day, we hear stories of the big roundups going to Magdalena to put these animals on the trains and head them to Chicago for slaughter, whatever they did. I bet if we just left the ranchers in charge, they'd probably figure out a better way to handle this than somebody in a helicopter. So
yeah.
let's move on to the next subject.
Okay.
Again, we've talked about our Socorro athletes. We've been seeing that they've been doing pretty good. I think this weekend girls wrestling team got like second or third place out of 30-some teams here in Socorro. So I want to congratulate all of those wrestlers that helped bring that trophy home, and all those that competed as well. So I think that was a good thing. We also heard some bad news, and it's been on Facebook and on the Chieftain, is that some young middle schoolers decided to take a gun. We've heard a BB gun, maybe it was a CO2
pellet
gun or whatever it was. It wasn't a smart decision by that youngster to do, and that caused a couple of things. It caused the disruption of the game. They were a little bit before the first quarter was ending, and everything stopped. The teams ran to their locker rooms. The fans were wondering what was going on. Then they were asked to leave, so there was stress brought to players, to coaches, to family members. My mother-in-law was there, and she didn't know what was going on. So let's that's another talk we need to have with our youth is to think about consequences when you're doing something like that. Is it really cool, or how much trouble am I going to get in, or is it cool getting in trouble?
Well, I think it's a big important thing. We just had the shooting at Rust. The movie set up in Santa Fe with Rust, handling of a weapon. A lot of discussions on that. Like it says, I went through gun safety class when I was 10 years old. First class my dad took me to when I was a kid, And, it's very important that our kids know these things. And we talk about ranching and rural, living in a rural environment, teaching our children to respect weapons from a early age, that these aren't something you just walk around with, right? Especially in this day and age. It would be a really good thing. It is important to stress it was a pellet gun, but like it says, how do we teach our children, what it means to carry a weapon?
Exactly.
And why, what a weapon is used for. If it's used for hunting, if it's used to self-defense, but that a weapon is not a toy. Unfortunately, with too many video games and too much first-person shooter games, our kids have been psychologically conditioned to think that it's a toy. They haven't been conditioned to understand the gravity and of what it is that they're actually doing. No excuse for the middle kids, no excuse for but it's not recognizing the seriousness of that and what that is going to do. And that is, like you said, it's one of the conversations that we hopefully, parents who have weapons in the house, pellet guns or otherwise, will sit down and have their children, that this isn't a joking matter. This is a very, very serious thing, and you don't play with weapons, period.
Yep. And there's been, back 1996, 97 in Columbine seemed to be one of the first school shootings. And we've had so many after that it's almost like comfortable to hear, another school shooting. And maybe for us it's comfortable, but for the people involved, it's not as comfortable. It's a tragedy, and it's psychologically trying on families and school districts. What student would want to come back to a situation where their friend might have been shot there in those hallways? So
well, I wrote an article that was published. I was in Denver at the time of Columbine, and I did, there's some research on this that's out there, and I reemphasize this because we're talking about it right now. After 1945, World War II, prior to World War II, all military and police were training with round targets. They were training with round targets. At the close of World War II, in debriefing the soldiers, they found out the soldiers fired less ammunition than they wanted them to. In other words, they hesitated in pulling the trigger. And going through the research, they decided to start training on human silhouette targets, which they do to this day. Mm-hmm. The reason of training for human silhouette targets is it reduces the hesitancy to pull the trigger. And they found the result that they wanted to in the Korean and the Vietnam War. Okay? So if you think of just a human silhouette being able to reduce the psychological hesitancy to fire, and you look at what our kids are exposed to in first-person shooter games, and without a parent teaching them what a weapon actually is and what it's actually for, there's a reduction in psychological hesitancy to do those things. Even first responders and officers that have been involved in these first shootings talk about the change in the shooter. In prior times when shooters are in mass shootings, they would unload literally the whole weapon on a single person. In other words, they would just pull the trigger and shoot until it was empty. Mm-hmm. But with the video games, they've learned now, and they've seen that. One shot, next target. One shot, next target. Mm-hmm. The kids through the video games have been trained through the video games, and that behavior is there. And then you combine that with some of the medication that they can be on sometimes, and it's a very difficult situation. So again, we need to explain to kids that the weapons are deadly, that it's a life and death, that you don't get 3 lives, that you don't come back.
Yep, you don't get to reset.
Even when I was in the military in basic training, one of the ways that they saved ammunition is we did target practice on a pinball-like machine to practice our shooting without actually going into the field. So we really have to think about the video games and the exposure that our children to, and make sure that we have a strong message that weapons are not a toy.
Yep.
They're not a toy, and they're not a joke. They're very serious.
And I go back again to the beginning of time, the 1970s, when I was in school.
Yeah.
And, I remember back then going to school, and all the trucks in the parking lot, they had gun racks, and there was shotguns, there was 22s, because after school, we'd go rabbit hunting, or we'd go shoot some dove or something. But I guarantee you, all those young men and women back then respected that tool that was sitting hanging off the back window there, and treated it as such, So, and now it's like the whole world gets shut down because it shouldn't be that way. It should be recognized as a tool and not a toy.
Well, what we can be thankful for in that reaction is that, number one, it wasn't a more dangerous weapon in some ways, but also that the child himself didn't get shot. Many times children have been have toy guns and the police get called and they wind up getting shot. But like you said with the earlier days, when we taught children what a weapon was and when they knew what a weapon was, it was something that was respected. But we've done a lot of things to, number one, reduce the psychological hesitancy of firing on another human being. We combine that with Ritalin. We combine that with other drugs that children are sometimes on for antidepressants, and it can be, very dangerous.
Yep.
And we really have to take that. We have to step up as adults, and we have to start doing our part to teach our kids the right way to handle weapons and the wrong way to handle weapons, and really address it. And I hope this incident is something that we can, parents can sit and talk with their kids and explain to them that this isn't funny, and it's serious.
Well, it'll give us an opportunity to reach out to some more professional people to bring on the show to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
But anyways, good luck to the Lady Warriors in Tier C on Wednesday. And although none of the fans will be able to travel, we'll wish you well from here and wait for your safe return. So the other thing is the Olympics are going on. And I remember when I was young and watching the Winter Olympics, we'd almost never get a medal. The United States were so terrible, and then plus they were boring to me. But now I enjoy watching curling. That little rock sliding down the ice for some reason. It's been such an attraction and such a popular sport. And other things. I watched the monobob sled, a single rider on a bobsled. Mm-hmm. The females got first and second place, gold and silver yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think our medal count is up to about 16th. We're in 8th place. I always used to compare the medal count with the United States versus Canada and versus the USSR back then. Now it's the ROC, and we're beating the ROC. I think Canada might be beating us. But it's really neat to watch the Olympic sports. Nowadays, the hockey teams, both hockey teams are doing pretty good. So, way to go. There's actually a relationship between one of the Albuquerque ice rinks where I think some of the women competed, or they played one of the hockey teams here in Albuquerque. So that's been on the news. So,
wow. Okay.
So we've had a little bit of connection there. So I think a lot of people are watching the ice dancers and skaters. Mm-hmm. And although there's been a little bit of controversy there with a Russian skater, once again, Russia's in trouble with doping, using illegal drugs. And this test happened back in December to a skater, and I have her name, but I don't even want to mention her name. She is 15 years old, so that bothers me that we're some of these countries are forcing their athletes to have to take this medication, and then they try to stop it, and give them time to clean it out of their system before the games start. But she got caught. She tested positive. She did test negative since, but ultimately she helped win the team gold medal, and she's going to be competing again for the individual medal. And that was back and forth. Now I hear that she's the Olympic Committee ruled that she can go ahead and compete, and I don't know if they're going to let her receive a medal or if it's still up in the air as to whether or not she gets to win anything. But at first they set the rules, and then this happens, and they kind of back off of the rules, and everybody else that's been following the rules are like, "Hey, man, we're playing clean."
Yeah.
It's sad to penalize a 15-year-old, but if your country's making you cheat, then somebody has to be
accountable
for cheating. So
yeah, that's hard. That's difficult to hear.
So then we did mention a little bit earlier that Wednesday we're going to be doing vocals with Val because you're going to be leaving.
Yeah.
And our guest is going to be Stephanie Garcia Richard, who is
Wonderful.
our state land commissioner. And I think this is a good conversation to have because the land commission is such a powerful elected office.
Right.
They're involved in so many things, public lands and what happens to them. The permanent fund, we always hear about the permanent fund and what that is, how that affects education. You know, we talked about the animals on public lands and what happens to them. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions and answers concerning some of these conversations. So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to Wednesday with Stephanie Garcia Richards. I want to thank her for agreeing to come on our show. You know, our little bitty program here is
Socorro?
is attracting statewide attention. So I
thank
think
you.
we should be happy about that.
I am happy about that. And yeah, thanks. I mean, I'd be interesting to talk to Stephanie too. I mean, just even like New Mexico Tech and their land deal as an educator with everything that is the Energetic Materials Research Testing Center, everything around Socorro Park is part of that. And so, Socorro Peak, excuse me, is part of that. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested to get some insight on that from her. So thanks for inviting her as a guest, and thanks Stephanie for accepting. Really appreciate it.
So I think we've had a pretty good little conversation here today. Some of you that have fallen asleep, you can wake up now. We're getting ready to finish up.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the vocals with Val, the Mondays we've been having. So hopefully we'll keep this up, Reese, and as long as we can, I'll be here to chat with you.
All right. Well, I think, we're going to be here. Like I says, I've really enjoyed it. I'm glad you're willing to come in on Monday and kind of let's keep this going because I think it's important to the community that we have a news source. That's really important. There's a lot of issues that are affecting us, and rural communities are traditionally underserved by media organizations. So it's a real honor to be able to do that. We did a great job on Friday. I want to thank you for that. It was really good to meet Denise Contreras and talk to the young ladies of Upward Bound and learn more about that. And you did a great job on that. So I really appreciate the go for it.
One thing I didn't mention that day, and we should have, is we talked a little bit about how they get trained to do interviews.
Right.
But if we would have been more observant, these young ladies came in very professional,
Oh, boy.
all dressed to the T's, like they were going to a professional interview, and they looked good. They were ready to talk. They knew their subject matter. So
Yes.
I think that alone tells me that Upward Bounds program is really working, and I hope to support it more in the future.
I agree with you. Yeah, folks, all you got to do is watch that video. It's also available on Rio Grande Valley Radio's Ranch House homepage. But watch those ladies. I too was very impressed with their mannerisms and their articulation. Very well done. And,
Yep.
and these are important programs to prepare our students to pick up their self-reliance in their career and go forward.
Yep.
Well, or shall we call it a day then?
Let's do it.
Well, Val, thanks so much for
betcha.
coming in, and I really appreciate it. Good conversation. And then, like I says, we'll be back with a special vocal with Val on Wednesday. Again, I'm going to be heading to Alpine, Texas, the annual cowboy gathering down there. Some great leading artists of Western country music, and bringing you some interviews and some stories about some of the great Western artists that are keeping the West alive. And we're really proud to feature them every Wednesday and Saturday on Rio Grande Valley Radio. We have an internationally recognized program Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. with Doug Figgs, and that one's a great program. Get a lot of listeners that listen in live Wednesday night, but we also play that show back Saturday in a recorded version for re-rides. It starts about 8:15 in the morning, and that allows our European listeners to listen in at a convenient time over there in Europe. So take a listen sometime. If you haven't heard what Western country music is, listen in Wednesday and Saturday. And meanwhile, 7 days a week, we do Your Country right here on Rio Grande. That's alternative country, traditional, and Western country. Thanks again, Val.